Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be turning a piece of ash into a platter using the lathe. Now I haven't ever turned a platter before, so I think this is going to be quite an interesting learning experience. I'm planning on going with some sort of sunset fade colour on this, and I think it'll be quite interesting to see how it goes. Now I've got it mounted on a faceplate, and I'm going to do something I don't usually do, which is turn the outside first with the foot on it. Then I'm going to flip it, and I'll probably use one of the hot glue methods of mounting it to another piece of scrap wood, which, believe it or not, will be strong enough, and I have done a tiny bit of research on it. Firstly, I ripped the blank down on the bandsaw just to make it a bit quicker rather than cutting it by hand, and then I also cut the blank to round on the bandsaw as well just to speed things up. I then used a combination of my round scraper and some bowl gougers just to profile the outside of this platter. I was going for quite a subtle curve to this, and I had great fun turning this, and I got a much smoother finish on the outside after watching lots of YouTube videos and really trying to practice my skill on the Christmas trees, and I found that really helped with this project. I really wanted to incorporate a foot to the bottom of this platter, as I've never done that before and thought it'd be really interesting, especially on an off-centre piece. I sanded from 120 grit through to 400 and applied some cellulose sanding sealer. So here's one coat of cellulose sanding sealer on the ash platter. I have realised it's a little bit too deep. I should have cut the blank probably about a third smaller, but it's fine. So we're going to move on to flipping this round, but I think what I'll do is I'll flip it round. I need to put wood turners blend on the outside first, then I'll flip it, and the wood turners blend should really bring out the grain even more than the sealer, so it should look really nice with a coat of that on. And yeah, I think I'm just going to try and hot glue somehow onto this bead here. So we're now going to apply some wood turners blend to this. Very simple to do. Simply get your bar of wood turners blend. Here's one from earlier, and spin the lathe up. And we're just going to apply the wax to the lathe with it spinning, moving the bar across. Give it about 30 seconds just to let it soak in, then buff it off. I'll demonstrate. Now it's up to you how much you want to put on. I've put on more than you need, but it doesn't really matter, and it will feel very waxy because you haven't buffed it in. I might add one little bit more because it doesn't really hurt because you'll just buff it off at the end. And you'll notice when you start adding too much, you'll get these waxy lines here. You might be able to make out all of these. That's just because you put too much on, so just grab your safety cloth and buff it in. So take the first layer of wax off. So now you'll be able to see most of the wax is taken off, so then you buff it to really achieve a nice shine to it. So now we've turned the outside of the platter, we're going to move on to turning the inside of it. So the way I'm going to be doing this is by using this piece of sapele, which has the faceplate screwed not central to the blank. And then I've got a bit of hot glue here, which I'll be gluing the blank to. Now it's really important you use a piece of wood that you don't really care about, because there's a chance that you'll get some tool marks and things on this. So I'm just using this scrap piece of sapele, as you've also got the screw holes in it. And as I said, make sure the faceplate is screwed not central to the blank. And also, for the gluing part, it doesn't really matter how central you glue that, because at the end of the day, this still won't be rotating centrally, so it will create that off-centre look. I'm really happy with the finish on that. It's super shiny. Even though wood turners blend is generally more of a subtle shine, if you buff it and apply enough layers, you can get it to a beautiful shine, and you can see the light reflecting in it here. Now, apologies for you not being able to see how I turned the inside of this platter. Helpfully, I decided to stand with my back facing the camera for the whole shot, which was quite irritating as I hadn't realised that until I went round to editing it. So essentially what I did was I had the blank mounted on the lathe, and I just turned it like a standard bowl for the inside, and I just went with what looked quite aesthetically pleasing to the eye. I didn't go with any measurements or anything, I just had some fun, and I just checked the depth to make sure I wasn't going to go through the bottom of the platter. But I'm sorry I didn't manage to get a shot of that. I did have the shots, but I was standing with my back facing the camera the whole time.
As this was an off-centre piece, I thought the best way to do it would be to hot glue it to a sacrificial piece of wood. Now, as I said, I've never done any of these things before, so it was all a bit of experimentation. I cut a piece of sapele down on the bandsaw and then I glued the platter to the piece of sapele. This worked really well and allowed me to have quite a strong hold on the platter and allowed me to turn it really easily. I then sanded from 180 grit up to 400 grit, taking extra care over the sharp edges on the corners, especially as you're essentially sanding some of the air because it's quite difficult when you're doing this sort of turning. And once again, I've got in the way of the camera shot here, so I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I think I was just trying to take the bowl a little bit deeper. I then again sanded from 120 grit through to 400 grit just to clean up the interior after I'd done another few cuts, as I wasn't quite happy with the depth originally. So sanding this, to be honest, is really important because this is what provides a good base for all of the finishing.
Finally, I have turned the off-centre bowl, or platter, and it's got a little bit smaller here and a little bit thicker here. So we're going to colour it now in a sunset fade. So this can be a little bit more of a challenge doing these bits of dye, but just mix up the dye. Tend not to use masking tape to do this, but I'm being lazy. And I've also let it dripple down the thing, but that's fine. So I'll mix this up with a little bit of warm water. I've got a sink in here now, so just grab some water. Now I'm just going to use a bit of lint-free cloth, just rip a little bit off, and I'm just going to attempt to apply this onto here. So I'm going for more of a sunset fade, so I'm going to coat the whole thing in a base of yellow first. You can see though, it's not actually getting very dark on there, which is quite interesting. I think it just a little bit more will do. And as I said, I would be applying Woodturners blend to the top of this. It's quite interesting how it's getting into the grain, this kind of orange colour. So I'm just going around the whole of the rim, building up over the yellow to create quite a nice fire pattern. Again, building over the colours, hopefully you can see somewhat of what I'm doing. It appears a lot lighter in real life, so the cameras make it look a bit different, but it's fine. I'm sure you can understand my point. Don't worry about going in that centre bit because we're going to be turning one more shaving out of that. So I'm just going in the middle like that just to get around that rim part there.
I then cleaned up the dye from the middle using my round scraper and just took a very shallow cut.
So we're going to move on to the finishing stage. I like to use a mixture of two finishes, which is Chestnut Products Cellulose Sanding Sealer, and then I add some Woodturners blend over the top of all of that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I had an absolute blast turning this thing, and to be honest, it's probably my favourite piece I've turned for a long time. I love the little foot on the back, and I really like the way the colour looks on it.